Meanwhile, Timmy Legler in our studio. Let's run the floor. Legs. Joel Embiid dropped 44 in a win over the Cavs yesterday. What did you see from Philly?
Impressive win on the road against a good team. Joel Embiid dominant once again. And James Harden wasn't great, but he was very good in the fourth quarter, getting to the line and making the game a lot easier for Embiid. That's what it's all about for James Harden playing point.
Embiid still hanging in that MVP race as well. Speaking of which, we had on ABC Luka and the Mavs knocking out Giannis and the Bucks by 6. What did you see here?
Yeah, Luka Doncic was absolutely spectacular in this game as a scorer, as a playmaker. This game was back and forth the entire way. Dallas takes over in the fourth quarter. Dallas quietly has played themselves into a role now where you can see them actually doing some damage in the Western Conference playoffs.
They're only one game behind Golden State right now, and Luka, from about the midpoint of the season on, has been as good as anybody in the sport. Speaking of which, there's Kevin Durant. The good news on Saturday night was he scored 55 points. The bad news is it wasn't enough. The Hawks beat the Nets 122-115. Listen to KD after that defeat.
Put in a bonus early every quarter. 37-14 free throw mix. And it's not because of the refs. It was because we reaching and being undisciplined and just playing too aggressive, So it's just fouls. And we can't do that if we want to be a winning team. Even though guys are missing shots and, it's the detailed stuff we got to just lock in on and do better.
So what he's pointing out is what you can clearly see if you watch them play. They can't stop anybody. And so the question is, with Kevin Durant at full strength and Kyrie Irving at full strength and the other pieces they've put around them, they're going to be in the play, and that seems basically to be in stone. Can they make that deep run in the Eastern Conference we've all been projecting?
Well, I'll tell you what, first of all, let's save that clip, because that's the only time you're going to hear a player say it wasn't the refs when there's that kind of a free throw disparity. Really honesty right there out of KD, because he knows there are issues on the defensive end of the floor. I think it's more likely that they go out early than they make a playoff run. And look, Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving on the floor at the same time, they're going to give you a chance every night to win any one game. The problem is when you get into a playoff series, assuming they get out of the play-in, you now have an ability to start to tweak your game plan against those two guys. And if you make them just a little bit less efficient, the fact that they can't really stop anybody, they can't grind out wins. They're going to have to win shootouts because they play smaller lineups. They're soft defensively. You can get where you need to. They can get beat up on their own defensive glass. So they can't get to 5 or 6 stops consecutively when you have to in a tight spot. You're just going to have to continue to rely on great shot making out of two players. That's not a formula for long-term postseason success, particularly when you're going to play teams eventually, if you go farther, teams like Miami that are great defensively, teams like Philadelphia that can play really good defense, Milwaukee as well, Boston, been the best defensive team in the league. Those are the 4 teams you're looking at the top. You're not going to win a series against a team like that. That could beat them 4 times when you can't string together 4 or 5 stops in the fourth quarter of games. And that's what Kevin Durant is alluding to, and he's 100% right.
We'll see. There's no reason at this point to believe that they're going to get Ben Simmons back in any meaningful way to make a run here. So they're going to have to do what those 2 guys, plus the cast they've put around them, Seth Curry and some of the other pieces. Let's go back to Philly, who we saw at the beginning of that rip. When they first made that deal, and for the first week or maybe a little longer than that, it looked so good. Since then, maybe not so much. Philly versus the Nets. Who's got the deeper shelf life, do you think, in the playoffs this year?
Wow, the Nets, that might be the one team the Nets could take care of, because I think Philadelphia is relying so heavily on James Harden being great. If he's not great, as much as he dominates the ball, they're going to have a very difficult time regardless of how good Joel Embiid has been, because you're talking about a center. There are ways to address centers defensively when you get into a playoff series in terms of taking the ball out of his hands, hitting him with blitzes whenever you can, and then it really falls on James Harden to bail you out. I don't think James Harden is the same player that he was at his peak in Houston. He just doesn't have the ability to win every matchup that's in front of him individually. That's what he relied on for years in Houston. He struggles with that on a night-to-night basis now. So if you get into a series and you could come up with a game plan game to game to adjust to Embiid, they don't have a lot of three-point shooting. They're last in the league in bench scoring. And James Harden is not consistently great the way that he was 4 or 5 years ago. That doesn't sound like a great formula for Philly. And Brooklyn might be the one team, because of the greatness of KD and Kyrie, they could get through a series against a team like Philadelphia for all the reasons that I just stated. I just don't know that Philly right now, after seeing a large enough sample size with these 2 guys together, I don't know that they're in the same category as a Milwaukee and a Miami Boston, I don't know. Robert Williams, that's a big loss. And Brooklyn, obviously, we just talked about their issues. But I think Milwaukee, Miami are on a different shelf right now maybe than Philly.
So interestingly, when all is said and done, after the trade that shook up everything with Simmons and Harden and all of that, you don't think either of these teams winds up in the conference final?
If I had to bet money on it right now, I think Milwaukee's going back to the finals. I think they've got their 3 stars healthy. They're just getting Brook Lopez back, and what he means defensively, you can't overstate that. And also Pat Connaughton was out for a long time. So their rotation is rounding into form, and they've got their 3 stars healthy, and Giannis is playing at an MVP level once again. If I had to put money on it, Greeny, today, I would say Milwaukee goes back to the finals.
Now, we will see. Stay close by. We'll have much more with Legs as we go. We will have Milwaukee tomorrow night, by the way. We have a special Tuesday NBA marquee matchup coming your way tomorrow night. We will see Giannis and the Bucks taking on DeRozan and the Bulls, 8 Eastern. We will start your night with a 1-hour edition of NBA Countdown, so that's 7 Eastern tomorrow night right here on ESPN. Meanwhile, over the weekend, college basketball, you watched it. North Carolina upsetting Duke in the Final Four in what was now Coach K's final game. He finishes with 1,202 wins, most by any head coach in the men's or women's game in the history of the sport, but obviously too shy of where he wanted it to finish. And here's my Uncle Seth Greenberg, no relation. It was a classic. It was that rarity, Seth, a game with all the hype in the world that not only lives up to it, but exceeds what we could have imagined. How do you believe this loss stays with Coach K as he goes off into retirement?
Well, it doesn't impact his legacy at all. But in terms of as he goes off into retirement, you think about this. Now, Coach K, his whole adult life basically has been at Duke, all right? He woke up every single morning with the purpose of what can I do to make Duke basketball better? What can I do in terms of recruiting, scheduling, the program, facilities, everything that surrounds being a head basketball coach at Duke? What can I do to make it better? That was his passion. That was what he absolutely lived for. He's going to wake up Wednesday morning. You know what? What's going to be his why? And you know what? When he's sitting there by himself, thinking about his career, he's not going to think about the 5 national championships, the Olympic gold medals. He's not going to be thinking about the players whose lives he impacted. In the back of his mind, knowing how competitive he is, I think it's going to go back to that game at Cameron and that game the other night in the semifinals. And it's unfortunate because he should be thinking about all the great things that he accomplished in his career, and his family will be around him, and they'll talk about those things. But as fiercely as competitive as he is, I think that this thing's going to stick with him for a while.
Well, so with that thought in mind, Seth, and it is, I have to imagine, the worst possible way for it to have ended, a first ever meeting with their arch rival in the Final Four of all things and falling short. I joked on my radio show last week, if he loses that game, he has to come back. He can't retire off of that. Let me ask it to you only slightly jokingly. Is there any chance he changes his mind and comes back?
Greeny, I'm going to give you a little preview. Good morning. It's time to get up. The GOAT. Is he retiring or is he coming back? Greeny, there's no chance he's coming back. Look, he's had an incredible career. Think about the championships. Again, I go back to the lives he's impacted. But no, it's his time to walk away. He understands that. He can look in the mirror and be comfortable with that. The bigger question is, where does he go moving forward? What is going to be his passion moving forward? But no, this is John Shar's program. All right, John Shar now has to basically create his own vision for what this program is going to look like under his leadership.
Hey, let me very quickly ask you about the game tonight, and we'll have more chance to talk about it a little bit later. But I mean, coming off of that, North Carolina won a championship on Saturday night. I don't care what anybody says. How do they have themselves ready to go tonight against a Kansas team that for the last 3 halves has looked like the best team in the country?
Hubert Davis has been an incredible leader. I think what they did is after they won that game, they went back, had their team meal, and he told those guys, I'm proud of you. Hey, you need to enjoy it. You need to appreciate this. And then, you know what he did? He said, all right, visit with your family, go upstairs, turn off your phones, put them away. When you come back down here for breakfast, all right, all of a sudden we're moving forward on, because we didn't, come here to win the semifinal game. We came here to win the national championship. This game's going to come down to a couple things. Obviously, establish Armando Bacot. Is his ankle going to be good? But there's also another thing, Greeny. What does Love have to do with it? Love has to do everything with it. He had 26 in the second half against Duke. He had 27 in the second half against UCLA. So Caleb Love's going to have a little bit to do with this. This will be a great championship game, but I think he will have his team ready to play and compete at a very high level against a very good Kansas team. And this is a Final Four and a national championship. This isn't about players. This is about programs, 2 elite programs.
Oh, no question. All right, I'll pin you down on who's going to win a little bit later. Stay close by. Get Up brought to you this morning by Wendy's, a proud sponsor of the 2022 John R. Wooden Men's and Women's Play.